So welcome to Satsang. As you know, if you have any questions, you're welcome to pose them by speaking them or by writing them in the chat box. I have a couple of questions that I will address later on during the meeting. So this waking dream is not about the dream. It is about waking up from the dream. The dream is an ongoing series of thoughts, images, sensations. They are all dreamlike. Waking up from the dream is awakening to the self, awakening to that is not of the mind, that is not contained in thought or contained in any image. From the perspective of the mind, reality is composed of events, thoughts, feelings. From the perspective of the mind, reality belongs to the body, belongs to the world. But from the perspective of consciousness, only consciousness is real. And there is nothing but consciousness. When you are at the mind level, you are perceiving yourself, first of all, as a character, as a person, as a body that is born in time and space. You perceive yourself when you are at the mind level as a limited self, a series of images and feelings that you define yourself by. And as you define yourself as a body and as a bundle of thoughts, you experience yourself as a mortal body, as a form, as something that exists in time and space. And you experience the angst of mortality, and you experience the whirlpool of life and death, of birth and death. But from the perspective of consciousness, there is no such thing. So the purpose of this life is for you to awaken to your reality, which you will find to be the reality of the self, the one reality, the reality of consciousness that is not subjugated to the mind and to the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are experienced from the perspective of the mind. Because consciousness is the reality that I am, borderless, formless, infinite, eternal reality. There is nothing that opposes it. So the experience of consciousness, knowing itself, awakening to itself, is the experience of peace, causeless peace and causeless happiness. The mind cannot conceive of the absolute. It can only perceive thoughts, perceptions. It can only perceive a world-body mind, which is the dream realm, the phenomenal realm, where there is up and down, right and left, black and white, the relative world of thought, right and left. It cannot conceive of the absolute. except it conceptualizes an absolute. And as it conceptualizes an absolute, it also conceptualizes its opposite, the relative. But from the point of view of consciousness, the absolute has no opposite. It's absolutely absolute. And does not have any opposite. So the peace and the bliss and the freedom of the self, the love of the self, has no opposite. It's not as it is at the mind level, where you have peace opposed to war, love opposed to hate, beauty opposed to ugliness. So knowing yourself, the self knowing itself, is an absolute knowingness. It is knowing yourself as the absolute and knowing the absolute as yourself. And this very knowingness is an absolute knowingness. It is not a relative knowingness. It's unshakable. In ignorance, we contemplate life for life's sake. In wisdom, we contemplate life for God's sake. In ignorance, the waking dream leads us deeper and deeper into itself. In wisdom, the waking dream leads us to God via our contemplation of truth, our contemplation of God, our contemplation of the reality of our experience, and not the contemplation of the mind and its infinite downloads. When you contemplate the world for the world's sake, meaning for your own personal sake in the world, as an object in the world, as a world event, you will continue to experience the turmoil of uncertainty and the confusion. The sense of loss and meaninglessness will accompany you until you return to the source, until you realize that that path takes you deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole, and that you need to travel the pathless path from God to God. So you contemplate the questions that are divine questions. What am I truly? What is it that I really, really want deep down? in my deepest love. How do I live honorably, honoring God's grace? What am I truly? What is the reality of my experience? Thought cannot tell you, cannot answer this question. Only the question can answer itself. Within the question is our love for truth. And love is the answer. Love is not personal and requires your complete surrender. You don't hold back 5%. You surrender 110%. So I welcome you to Satsang, and whatever questions you may have, you are welcome to Okay, well, in the meantime, I will address a question that Emmanuel asks. Is consciousness self-aware without knowing the world? Is consciousness aware without knowing the world? Anjin, I see your question and I will come to it in just a minute. So first, Emmanuel's question, is consciousness self-aware without knowing the world? So consciousness, by consciousness, we are referring to not a concept, but the reality. So in this very moment, there is a reality. There is also an appearance, there is also a perception, and this perception is constantly changing. As I'm moving my hands, as you're looking right and left, it's constantly changing. There are bodily sensations, they're constantly changing. But there is a reality that is a knowingness, it's awareness, consciousness, presence that does not change as the image change. Like the screen does not change when the images on the screen changes. And the reality of the images is really the screen, because when you go up to touch the image, you're actually touching the screen. So by consciousness, we're referring to the reality, not a concept. And by the world, we're referring to perceptions. You look at a tree, you look at a lake, you look at a flower, there are perceptions. You look at your hand, there are perceptions. And the question is consciousness self-aware without knowing the world? So consciousness, first of all, is self-aware, meaning consciousness, another word for consciousness is awareness. And in your experience, the only thing that is aware is awareness. But from the mind perspective, what is aware is the body, or the brain, or the mind. That's from the mind's perspective. But from consciousness perspective, from awareness perspective, the only awareness, the only thing that is aware is awareness. Think about it. If the body is aware, then the body must be awareness, because the only thing that can be aware must have awareness qualities within it. And whatever has awareness qualities within it is awareness. So if the body is aware, then the body is awareness. But there is only one awareness. There isn't awareness of the body, awareness of the tree, awareness of the other body. There's only one awareness. Why? Because awareness has no borders. The body has a border, the tree has a border, but not awareness. So awareness is borderless. Consciousness is borderless. It doesn't start at point A and end at point B. So there's only one awareness because it is borderless. And the only thing, if you want to use that term, that is aware is awareness itself. So awareness is self-aware. It is aware that it's aware. Because its very substance is awareness. Because the substance of awareness is awareness, then it's aware that it's aware. It's made out of awareness. You know that you know. Because the reason why you know that you know is because you are this awareness. You're aware that you're aware. When you say, I am aware that I'm aware, you're not referring to the body. You're referring to awareness itself. Awareness is aware that it's aware. So yes, consciousness is self-aware. Now the question is, consciousness, self-awareness dependent on the world? Meaning dependent on perceptions. Think about it this way. Between the perception of the tree and the perception of the lake, there is no perception. Between perception A and perception B, there is no perception. So you go from perception A, no perception, perception B, no perception, perception C, no perception. Because if there was no perception, sorry, if there was perception between perception A and perception B, then there would be one. There has to be some space between perception A and perception B that is not a perception. Like between thought A and thought B, there is no thought. But although there is no perception between perception A and perception B, there is still awareness. Because you still are. You're aware there is a tree, and then you're no longer aware of the tree. Now you're aware that there is a lake. But between the awareness of the tree and the awareness of the lake, you still are. You are. Awareness is. Awareness is aware during the tree, between the tree and the lake, and during the lake. It is aware across the board. So awareness is not dependent on the world between the tree, which is a world appearance, and between the lake, which is another world appearance. It still is. So awareness is self-aware, independent of the tree, independent of the lake. But the tree or the lake depend on awareness. Otherwise, what would they be? What would be a lake or a tree without awareness? It wouldn't be. Also, think about it this way. In deep sleep, the mind is in very low, neutral, the dial is turned way down. And the world is non-existent. But yet you still are. There is no awareness of the world, but there is awareness of awareness. You still are. You still know yourself. You don't know yourself as a body, because that would be the body world. That would be the body mind, world, body, mind. But you know yourself as awareness. The mind is absent, so the mind cannot speak anything about that. But when the mind arises again, and it says, oh, I had a really good night's sleep, then the mind is acknowledging that something was present during deep sleep. But the mind wasn't there. It says I had a good night's sleep because it's impersonating consciousness. But something was there in order for the mind to say I had good rest, a good sleep. Whatever it is that was there is what is here right now, which is awareness, consciousness. Before the mind arises and the world arises is consciousness. Then consciousness to perceive a world creates a limited mind. It does so out of its freedom. And via this mind, it is perceiving a personal world. So I perceive this perception, you perceive a different perception, you're in a different room, a different town, a different city. That's at the mind level. But at consciousness level, it's completely free of the mind. It is not in the perceiving business. It's purely in the awareness business, in the being business, in the peace and eternity and infinity business. It is at rest as it is, and the perception of the world depends on the mind, arises from consciousness impersonating a mind in order to perceive the world. And at some point or the other, this world will disappear. It disappears in deep sleep, and it disappears at the death of the body as a manifestation. But consciousness doesn't disappear. It sort of energizes the mind, depending on how the mind plays this waking dream. If you play this waking dream according to your own personal wishes and personal desires, then that energetics of the personal self upon the death of the body will rearrange itself, but within the same kinetics, into more of the same. So like your current limited mind experience is inspired by the mind that you have maintained and that you are recollecting and replaying in this lifetime. So this lifetime, this manifest form, this manifest mind dream is in the play your opportunity to move in a different direction, to return to the source, to contemplate your true nature, to contemplate consciousness, so that this dynamic of what we refer to as the wheel of samsara does not keep playing itself over and over in various forms, so that the cycle of birth and death comes to an end. Okay, Manuel, I went a little bit beyond your question, but that was my reply to your question. Okay, Angine, so you ask, what do you do when a download happens to return to the self? How do you return to the self when a download happens? So there are two important directions that you need to contemplate, Angine. First, when a download happens, it downloads as thoughts and as feelings. It is very important for you to completely surrender to the stillness and to surrender to the entire feeling state. You surrender to what is arising. So the practice of stillness and surrender is a very important way to approach these downloads. Rather than trying to think your way out of the problem, rather trying to blame yourself or somebody else for the apparent problem, rather than praying for God to come and save you from the current problem. Absolutely surrender. Surrender is inviting the mind into not knowing. Telling the mind, okay, We just don't know what's going on. We're just going to be completely still and feel the whole thing, experience the whole thing, and remain still, then go deeper and deeper into the invitation of the sensation and of the thoughts into your entire space without stirring the thoughts or without trying to think your way out of your feelings or out of the situation. So in surrender, there is a deep stillness, a deep not knowing, an inner willingness to feel it all, not on your personal behalf, but on the behalf of the mystery of being. We say yes to what is appearing. It's a complete abandon without any personal intention, without any personal desire or personal agenda or personal trickery. We say yes with a complete willingness to die completely into what is arising. It's a complete surrender. The other aspect of the contemplation of the reactivity or the download that is arising is to inquire, to do the inquiry, the Atma Vichara. Because all the downloads are unhappy and they refer to a person. A download is composed of thoughts and feelings that basically are resisting what is. They're wishing that what is was not. And also wishing for something else to be rather than what is. So a download is composed of resisting, not wanting what is, and of desiring what is not to be instead of what is. And this resistance and seeking, they refer to a person. The person being me, this man, this woman, this person that knows better, that has a personal preference, that things should not be this way. I've been a good person all these years. Why is this happening to me? It should be happening to my neighbor. I've been a very good partner. Why is he or she leaving me? It shouldn't be happening this way. I've been a very good employee. Why am I not getting the raise and somebody else is getting it? It should not be happening this way. It's always referring to me, to I as a me, I as a person, as a body mind. So the contemplation of Atma Vichara is, what am I truly? Am I the body mind? Or is the body mind an appearance? Is the body an appearance in the mind? Am I an appearance in the mind? Or am I the mystery of being, the reality of being, the reality of consciousness? What am I truly? What is my reality? What is the reality of my experience? That question should be suspended, should be brought up and maintained alive, maintained on fire, maintained awake in your contemplation, without being given to thought, without telling thought, okay, here is a bone to you, chew on it. It's got to remain suspended alive without any answer from the mind. Allow the question to be and to expand and be alive in your what is it that perceives in this very moment? I don't know. Start with I don't know and remain with I don't know. What is the I? There's something, reality that perceives right now. What is it? What is its name? What is its age? What is its form? Does it have a name, an age, a form? Where does it start? Where does it go? Where does it end? What is its color? To go to the reality it perceives, not to confuse what is perceived, to be the reality that perceives. When a thought arises, it is perceived. What is perceived should not be confused with the reality that perceives. A thought should not be confused with the formless self. That is the way to be with a download in a way that alters samsara. Okay, Anshim. Any questions? Richard asked me the following questions. What happens to the bliss and peace of the self that I experience in satsang after I leave satsang? I go back to the world and satsang is gone. When you come to satsang, satsang comes to you. It alters you without your knowing. It's like a medicine that you take and it's starting to work on the virus without your knowing. You may not immediately experience the effect of the medicine, but in time you will. Satsang is not for the mind. It works at the mind, upon the mind, but much more deeper than that as well. But it's not for the mind. It is not some information for the mind to use and to practice and to use to have a better life. Satsang is a soaking in the self, soaking in the bliss of the self. And yes, you do experience the peace of the self, the bliss of the self, the Satchitananda. But it's much more than that. It is not just that you experience Satchitananda, but you also are being transformed without your knowing. You have to trust that. Be watchful of the mind that arises and says, oh, that was good, I would like more of it. Just stay with the silent peace, the silent bliss, the silent appreciation, the inner appreciation, the inner recognition, rather than engaging or saying yes to the mind that says, well, that was good for me, I'd like more of it. Because that's what the mind does. The mind projects a world after having projected a separate self, a finite mind and limited self. And it projects the world. So its conversation is always, how was it for me? Can I get more of it? How can I keep it? How can I practice it? How can I duplicate it? How can I store it? How can I multiply it? For me being this personal finite mind, while the self is infinite. It's important to recognize that that's what the mind does, and that what you are is not the mind. You are not what the mind defines you to be. It's the mind that says, oh, that was great for me, it was great satsang for me, now it's after satsang, what's going to happen to me? Do I still have the goodies? Because the mind is constantly having conversation about the world, about experiences that relate to me, this person, this personal mind. So we become our discrimination increases. We start to discriminate between those movements of the mind, the movements of the personal self-impression. And as soon as we contemplate, well, what is that? Is it really real? Am I really not the self? Am I really not? Am I really this person that thought says I am? That is now not experiencing the bliss of the self? As soon as you pose this question, it is as if you are shedding the light onto the mind, because the mind likes to stay in the darkness. Look out at the problems, but don't look at my assumption that I am a personal self. Look at the problem here, the problem there. You don't have this, he has that. He's enlightened, you're not. But don't look at me, the charlatan, the trickster. The mind doesn't like the light to be shined upon the trickster, upon itself. It likes you to continue to be thinking about your problems. How come you don't have the bliss of the self now that you are not in satsang? That's your problem. Think about your problem. This is how the mind operates. But in fact, behind that trickery of the mind, that distraction, there is the assumption that I am this person, that I am Richard, that I am a man. That there is a personal self. And as soon as you ask yourself, is that really true? You're shedding light onto the shadow, and the light starts to shine. So your interest is not in having a good satsang or a good blissful experience. Your interest is in awakening from the illusion of separation, from the illusion of being a limited personal self, a limited mind. And this interest, you carry it, you bring it to satsang, but also after satsang, so-called after satsang. You're carrying it, you maintain your love and your passion alive. You have to be clear about your passion. What is it that you truly love? Satsang is not a satsang experience. Satsang is the self. So you love the self. When you love the self, you love satsang. You are in satsang because you love the self. The self takes you straight to itself. Because you are the self, and when you love the self, when you love consciousness, you're loving what is, you're loving the reality of being. And not the comedy tragedy of the play of the personal self. We like to go to the movies to experience some experiences, but then we don't live in the movies. We don't live our whole life in the movies. We leave the movies after 2 hours. Okay, that's... Any questions?
Magdi? Oh, there's one from Holly.
Yes. Oh. Hello, Esther. Yes, Holly. Hi, Holly. You're right. I am here at the Tango weekend up in Boston. Oh, great. Nice. And it's so easy for these things to get so heightened in terms of desires and hopes. Yes. You already talked a little about how the person knowing better leads to suffering. Any other advice? Yes. Yes. Yes, Holly, allow the light of being, allow God's light to shine through you. It takes you to a tango weekend, a festival in Boston. So you celebrate, the dance, the movement, the friendship, the creativity, the inner beauty. So you celebrate that, you rejoice as that, you say thank you to divine grace to be channeling all that through you and to be presenting all that for you to express, the joy, the freedom, the lightness of being, in your dancing and in your friendships. And then the mind comes and says, oh, wait a minute, what can I do with that? I hey, you know, I've got to do something with it. But you already are doing something with it. You're celebrating it. You're celebrating God's gift, God's grace. You already are doing it. You are living it, and you're expressing it, and you're saying yes to that, yes to the beauty. So you have a gratitude in your heart. You say, I'm really grateful for this, so beautiful. And then the personal self will come in and say, you know, which is the trickster, that the impersonator, the one that says, oh, you are holy, and let me see, now you got to figure a strategy for you to use this and to benefit from this in the future, or whatever. But this you is the imagined, is imagined. You are not a limited self. The limited self, the limited holy arises as thoughts. But thoughts are not what you are. You are the consciousness. You are the transparency of being. You are the infinite invisible. You're not the thoughts that appear, even though they may be very convincing, even though they may feel very convincing. They still don't know you. They know nothing about you. They can't define you. They just assuming. There is that assumption, which is the initial assumption that the mind makes, that I am somebody that has to find a way in life. And in that assumption, you've limited yourself, reduced yourself to an imaginary bundle of thoughts and feelings. And they will continue to spin because that assumption is still on board. As long as that assumption is on board, the spin of what am I going to do? How can I benefit? Why is this not happening to me, etc. That spin of thoughts will continue as long as the assumption is not seen through, the assumption that I am holy, that I'm a female, that consciousness is a female form. And as soon as you realize that, no, I am not a female form, I am consciousness that is experiencing a certain experience through the female form, through the personal mind, through the limited self, through the limited mind. I'm experiencing a certain experience, which is fine, because it's also God that is channeling these experiences through the body-mind, through that particular body-mind. But this does not mean that you are the body-mind. In your direct experience, you are not the body-mind. You are God experiencing via this particular body-mind this specific experience that we refer to as Holly's experience. Similarly, in Magdi's experience, through the body-mind Magdi, there is God's grace that's manifesting itself and expressing itself as this limited mind. I do not dance the tango. I am not in Boston. You, meaning this particular body-mind Holly, is experiencing Boston, and this particular body-mind Magdi is experiencing this experience right here. But this does not mean that I am the body-mind. You see? The mind is, in a way in which sort of a sort of energetic contraction or energetic form, limited formation that is the creation of consciousness to experience a particular limited mind form, particular limited experience. But it does that through infinite body minds. It doesn't just do it through, it's not limited to Magdi's body mind or Holly's body mind. It is infinite body-minds. So you could say that God experiences the world via body-minds. It does so out of its freedom and out of its sense of play. But there is no ignorance in that. The ignorance is in believing that you are a particular body-mind. It's like God believing that I am born and I am mortal. The I is not born and is not mortal. So enjoy the celebration. Be grateful for the celebration. Say yes to God's grace and allow God to play her play. Don't interfere with God's play. Simply love the play. And you can only love the play when you recognize God's grace. Because as soon as you imagine that you are a personal self, you are not acknowledging God's grace. You are putting sticks in God's wheel and saying, hey, it's about me. Give me a better deal. Deal me a better hand. You're being dealt a wonderful hand, a beautiful hand. As soon as you say yes to what is being dealt, you will be so gratified in saying yes to God. There's only one true desire, holy, that is the desire to awaken from the dream of separation. The impression that you are the mind, you need to awaken from that impression. That is the divine desire. All other desires are worldly. Okay, Holly, enjoy your weekend in Boston, and see you soon. Great. So, Esther, you had a question?
Yes, what you just shared with Holly very much relates to my question.
Yes.
It's more I don't even know how to put it in a question, but it seems like ignorance judges the experience of being in a body mind and says that any involvement in the beauty or the celebration is somehow you're being at risk, or you're taking a risk by being involved in and enjoying the beauty of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems I'm beginning to see that is ignorance, just
Mm-hmm.
more judgment of the same.
Mm-hmm.
What it always does is it's based on judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
part of the freedom of waking up is seeing that, is putting that aside.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, Esther. Celebration. We say yes. We say yes to. We say yes to God. We say yes to what appears, and when we say yes, already we are in celebration. Already, the celebration starts. Already, the entire realm is altered. When we say yes, we're not saying yes to our personal self. That hey, yeah, I'd like to feel better. I'd like to feel more of that. It makes me feel good. No, we're saying yes. As soon as we say yes to God's grace, to whatever is appearing, there is an openness. And the resistance isn't there. There isn't an argumentation. There is an inner peace. And we can discern, because we're open and empty to what is lovely and what isn't. And naturally, we are drawn towards what is lovely. Having a relationship with neighbors and friends who have a certain quality of listening, of presence, enjoying the arts, that certain art that has a certain divine inspiration in it, enjoying walks in nature or being in nature or looking at a certain view that has the touch of God in it. Celebration, you're not celebrating your personal thoughts. You're celebrating God's gift. So the mind that has a particular limited set of experiences is blessed. It's blessed by God. There's nothing wrong with the mind. Ignorance is believing in a separate reality than the reality of God, believing in the reality of the personal self or the reality of the world, a world. That is ignorance. And as soon as you do that, you're separating God into bits and pieces. And there is no the possibility of celebrating God's grace, which is the wholeness of being, is impinged upon. It's not. So yes, celebrating love, celebrating beauty, celebrating creativity, celebrating peace, celebrating the movements of the body, celebrating, the human expression with so many forms, celebrating the animal kingdom as it appears to us. It's celebrating the shape and color of a tomato. It's all an expression of the mystery of being. It resonates, the mystery of being, and the magical grace and love and creativity and abundance and bounty of God, of the divine grace. Ignorance is believing in a separate reality, that there is a personal reality, that in this reality is this body-mind, there's some body-mind and external world. There is a reality apart from the infinite, invisible reality of consciousness. That's ignorance. And as soon as we believe that, we will suffer the sense of angst and fear of death and regrets, and we will experience the personal self as being real and the world, the external world, as being real. And we'll find ourselves wrapped up in the whirlpool of desires and avoidances. And the peace of being and the ease of being then eludes us.
Magdi, the same would hold true then of really of any kind of creating something. You always read about not being the doer. That simply means that one is creating without being preoccupied with.
Yes, but creation is being created through us. So through us there is creation. It is not by us, but through us. We love to create, and this love comes from beyond, through us. So yes, we say yes to this creative aspect that appears to us through us, but we don't own it. We express it, we celebrate it, and we keep it. We don't grab it. We just allow it to be, and it blesses everybody because it's coming from beyond through us. So there is no doer. There's just the creativity and the generosity and the love of God that's just expressing itself. It expresses itself through the sunshine, through the song of birds, through the poetry that arises sometimes from us, through various expressions, human expressions, that these expressions that really touch our heart, you will find that there isn't any holding or grabbing or trying to show off or trying to sell any goods or trying to impress anybody. It's just a love for the expression. That's just, we find ourselves in love with the creation and the expression. In a way, that's the heart of satsang. It's being spoken through a particular body-mind, but no one owns it. There is no doer. I mean, in thought, a thought says there is a doer, but in fact, there is no doer. Just the grace of the self, the grace of consciousness, God's grace. Okay, Esther, thank you for your question. Okay, well, thank you for your love and for your company, and enjoy your Boston visit, Holly, and we'll see you soon. Much love to you.